So we will take a look first at Cube, in which some strangers awake in a strange place as 6 souls find themselves trapped in an incomprehensible maze and struggle to, well, comprehend it. Taken from their normal lives by unseen forces, seemingly at random, they are placed inside a malevolent Rubik's Cube of deadly traps. Maurice Wint's Quentin McNeil, a police officer, takes the lead in driving the gang forward on the basis that that's got to be better than sitting still. Aided by Wayne Robson as Wrens, also known as the Wren, a serial jailbreaker. Nikki Guadagni's Dr. Helen Holloway provides both medical attention and a running commentary from the admittedly now somewhat justified conspiracy nut perspective. And while no one's quite sure initially what despondent cynic David Hewlett's David Worth's function would be, turns out he's unwillingly a small cog in the design of the wheels of whatever this structure is. On the possibly working out some method in the apparent madness is Nicole DeBoer's Joan Levin, a young math prodigy, and after a fashion, Andrew Miller's Kazan, a severely autistic man with the capacity to factor prime numbers with amazing speed, which will help them decrypt the few clues to navigating and surviving the cube that seems eager to kill them all via slicing, dicing, acid attacks, and various other surreal, borderline physically impossible health and safety violations. For a low-budget debut, Cube is still a quite remarkable piece of business, and not just commercial. While it's not without a clutch of flaws, the central mystery of what on earth this structure is and why it's been built and why they find themselves in it is a really strong hook to pull you through the 90 minutes, alongside the constant threat of a grisly end. Indeed, it's a masterstroke that ultimately gives no answer at all to any of these questions, a pitfall that the sequels blundered straight into. It looks much better than its budget would perhaps imply, the highly stylised nature helping greatly, and while the dialogue and performances aren't particularly memorable, it falls squarely into good enough territory, for me at least, and its only main failing is apparently not having a way to end things, with some changes to Maurice Dean Wint's character coming out of nowhere and making matters even worse by making him do a cut rate Jason Voorhees tribute act in the final stretch. Fitting, I suppose, for sci-fi horror, but I was more on board with the science fiction than the horror, so the final reel is perhaps more of an ending than a conclusion. Yet, it is still a bold and distinctive debut directorial turn from Natali, and well worth excavating these 20-odd years later.
Yes. I hadn't seen Cube in ages, and I found it solidly entertaining this time. There are so many problems with it for me that I can't call it a great film, but for a 90-minute, high-concept, low-budget science fiction film, it does a really good job. And I mean, the big problem I have, though, is that I don't care about anyone in it, apart from like some of them are quite happy to see die, but there are no likeable characters. That's a bit of a problem.
Yeah, there's almost no characters. No one really gets fleshed out enough for it to be, or for what happens to various ones at the end to make any sense as well. It's a bit weak in that regard. Yeah,
I suppose the only character that I have any sympathy for is Kazan, but he's not really a character.
Yeah,
he's neither good nor bad. He's just this kind of unfortunate soul put in there, whereas everybody else, I mean, Holloway's more irritating than bad. But even Nicole DeBoer's character, the 27-year-old high school student, because obviously, even her, for some reason, she's just like, she starts getting slightly arrogant at one point, and then like she's in this. She's working at the dimensions of the cube. She said it was like 14 foot by 14 foot by 14 foot cube, and she had to walk directly in the line towards Kazan and get annoyed that he was sitting there. You could have walked either side of him. So you just like, no, you've any vague sympathy I had for this character, that's gone. But then the big problem is that you start off with Maurice Dean Wint's character, Quentin, and he's just a pretty unpleasant person from the start, but I don't understand why anybody follows him. Why they're doing what he tells them. So it's like there's no real characterization there. There's not even any real shorthand used. It's like, we're doing this. Oh well, the man said it a wee bit loudly, we should probably follow him.
He says he's a policeman, let's do what he says.
And because of course he must be telling the truth, why would he lie?
But you can imagine, I mean, knowing people now as we know them, and in the current time, you can understand that actually in that sort of situation, maybe people would be compelled just to follow the first person that put their hand up and said, I'm an authority figure.
Maybe, he says it loudly enough.
I think depressingly, perhaps, that's one of the more realistic aspects of the movie.
Yes, not likeable, but possibly realistic. And some of the dialogue is rotten, quite frankly. But what drags me along, and I kind of guess it's really the point, and it's why the kind of horror stroke slasher stuff at the end, Scott, just it sort of goes away from the key appeal of the film. It's like this is the MacGuffin of the cube itself. It's like, why are they in here?
Yeah.
And you shouldn't try and answer that, because that's what's interesting. It's like this.
Yeah.
How could this been built? And like, you get the idea of Hewlett's character of, is it Hewitt?
Hewlett.
Yeah, David
With an
Hewlett.
L.
So yeah. Hewlett. Then he's like was part of a machine that put this together. I mean, it was kind of corporate machine rather than an actual machine. But like, his like explanation for it may actually make some sense, and that's kind of a scary thing in itself. But beyond that, it's like, yeah, this is a mysterious thing. They don't know. There's no way for them to know, because they're in the inside. They can't see the big pictures. They keep saying in the film. But so you've got this mystery that you don't want solved. It's like, okay, but they just have to try and get out, and that's the interesting part, and that drives them. And then they start having the extra character bits of that guy just going mad for no good reason.
Yeah.
You know, it's
Because grr.
Yeah, he's becoming a violent sociopath and just beating people up and hating that guy from the beginning for no good reason. You find out later there might be a reason to resent him, but in the beginning, no, not so much. So, so that's where I find that disappointing, is when anytime it deviates from just like them being completely puzzled by it, but then having to use some sort of resource to get out of it, and it deviates from that, my interest level drops quite a lot. But that central thread, which still stays there throughout, is really appealing and really compelling. And then you add to that the fact that it really was a low budget. They only had enough money to build one cube, plus like the back wall of another one when they're looking through one of the windows. And they had so little money, they wanted to have 6 different colours to have to match up with the whole cube thing. Didn't even have enough money for a 6th gel filter pack. That's how low budget they're working on. And for that, it looks pretty damn good.
Yeah.
It's all right. Visually, the worst thing about Cube is like the early DVD transfers of it, which suffered terribly from like colour smearing and stuff. But I think the sort of the Blu-ray releasing things dealt a bit better with that. But it is quite surprising how good it still looks, in a sense, when it, what was it like, IMDb, courtesy check of IMDb trivia, it was like 360,000 Canadian dollars or something, whatever that translates to at the time. I'd taken into account like that the effects work was done for free. Essentially, the digital effects work was done for free by some company that wanted to just show their appreciation for the Canadian film industry, apparently. So it's a little bit disingenuous to say that anyone could go and make this movie for that money, but it's still that is still essentially, that's almost micro budget. I don't know where you would draw the line at that nowadays, but I think the best thing about Cube is how well it stands testament to that whole thing of, working with such tight restrictions. How inventive can you be? And like you say, Drew, the whole thing around the set design and the set build. It's fascinating to think, and like they shot it in 30 days or something like that. I mean, tiny budget, had to be really inventive, like essentially guerrilla filmmaking. But if a kitchen sink drama, yes, you could do that on an iPhone now. But this is a sci-fi movie, and it needs things like sets and set design and whatnot. So to add that element in as well, and to bring it in on that kind of a budget is absolutely insane.
Yeah, with a higher and more convoluted concept than but films that are costing like 300 million to make these days. So.
Yeah, exactly. It's the sort of thing that you could imagine. You imagine if you asked Christopher Nolan to remake this, or if it had just been his idea.
If it's Christopher Nolan, he'd have built the entire cube practically and have them falling through all of the traps for real.
Of course, yes, he would have had to have done that.
He would have actually built a full-scale one.
Yeah,
several thousand meters. Yes, yeah. and have it actually move around. So
yeah, that's it.
He's dedicated.
That's it. But I think, it's very creaky around the edges. I think, like you pointed out, Drew, some of the dialogue is absolutely risible. But for the most part, it's delivered well enough. And most of the performances kind of hold together for the majority of the movie. It is only in that final act where things start to fall apart and there's some like sort of teeth-grindingly hammy stuff going on. Especially on the part of Morris Dean Wint. But David Hewlett's a pretty reliable presence. And
he's solid throughout, I would say.
He's solid throughout, and he's pretty much solid in everything he's in, to be honest. I think, weren't he and Natalie high school buddies or something like that, which is why I think he kind of pops up in most of Vincenzo's stuff at some point or another. And he's always sort of value in whatever he's in. I would suggest he's probably the strongest performance here. And you're right, the worst thing to do with a movie like this is to watch it in the company of someone who you know is going to be frustrated at a lack of answers, because to expect answers is entirely missing the point of the movie.
Yeah.
I've never understood how, that there can be such a polar separation between, that surely the most satisfying thing is not to be handed everything on a plate and to walk away and be left to think about it for yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, we have to live alongside them, but I don't understand people who need everything answered in their entertainment. It's like, songs that leave you in a cliffhanger, songs that just end halfway through, or better still, songs that start halfway through. It's that sort of satisfaction, but it holds up remarkably well, to be honest, given that it's now 20 plus years old. What was it, 1997, something like
21,
that?
22, yeah.
Yeah, and like I say, still, I mean, a really superb calling card. And the fact that to go back and watch it again now, which again, probably 7 or 8 years since I last watched it, I should imagine, to go back and find it just as enjoyable now I'm not super surprised, but it was kind of reassuring. It's a bit of a comfort blanket of a film, really. It's a bit like, it's in that same ballpark as Aronofsky's Pi.
Yeah,
I think in a lot of ways, maybe not quite as sophisticated as that, but still in terms of, an early work from a filmmaker who's gone on to do other stuff. And demonstrating that really, if you've got an idea to make a movie, there's no reason for you not to go out and do something about it, I suppose. But yeah, really, really, really pleasantly. Yeah, a nice rewatch.
Yeah, I did enjoy it. Also, the one thing that sort of it slowly just occurred to me just now, but I very much noticed it this afternoon when I was watching the film. But here's just one tip, though. When you're trying to establish that one of your characters is a mathematical genius, don't begin the film by showing them struggle to work out whether a number ending in 2 is a prime or not.
That'll work. There's a rule for that, right?
I think one thing that maybe annoys me a bit in the meta discussion about this is, although this film did very, very well commercially, but like 9 million or something from a return of 360 or whatever we think it's going to be dollars, it did very well. James Wan basically ripped this central premise off completely with Saw, in my opinion, and did so much better with it and milked a franchise for 10 films or however many Saw got up to, and they're just much worse and less interesting films. It's like the dummies version of this film where everything gets answered in the end.
I've still never seen a Saw film. I'm quite happy for it to remain the case.
That is the true path, yes.
Talking of films that have effectively ripped this off, given that the original director wasn't involved, what are the sequels like, which I have owned since this came out on DVD, but I've never actually got myself to watch?
The meta review is that they try and answer what the cube is, and don't do a very good job of it. So,
well, Cube 2 makes the mistake of thinking it's going to answer some questions, but going deeper and throwing more questions in and making it a hypercube, because adding an extra dimension ought to clear things up nicely. And then I don't think I've watched all of Cube Zero because I fell asleep trying to watch that, which tells you something about it. I want to say the Cube 2 and Cube Zero were both written and directed by the same guy, though, right? Not Natali, obviously, but I'm sure they were both written and directed by the same guy. Why he was handed the reins or whatever, I don't know, and why you would go so askew from the central premise and abandon the thing that made it so interesting in the first place, I don't know, but perhaps there's just money in explaining stuff to stupid people.
Yeah, I presume it's the standard movie industry answer of, well, that one made money, let's try and make more money. Ideas be damned. So yeah,
it's like exactly. You spent $250,000 on this, and it made $9 million. So even if we spend $1 million on the sequel that only makes half as much, we're still in profit, mate. Yeah.
Art. Yeah,
exactly. I kind of want to go back and watch Cube Zero again purely because I didn't get all the way through to the end of it, and now having rewatched this, I'm almost compelled to watch the 2 sequels again just to refresh myself. But I know that it'll be a fool's errand.
I swear I did watch Cube Zero, but I could not tell you a single frame of what happened in it. So that's how memorable it is, as opposed to Cube, which although I don't recall seeing in the last 15 years, but I actually remembered fairly vividly. I could have written exactly the same review from memory of that viewing 15 years ago as I did when I watched it the other day. So it's certainly a much more memorable film than any of its sequels.
100%. I know for a fact you did watch Cube Zero, because it was after you watched it and I asked you, is it worth watching? And you told me, hell no.
You immediately thought the opposite.
Scott's known to be lying about these things. So.
Yes.